Okay, let's pick up with chapter 7, guys. It was just getting good, right? Let's see what Charlie does to fix that problem with Bertha. By the time I got home, it was getting dark. Gus's old rattletrap of a car was in the driveway, and the smell of spaghetti sauce was drifting through the screen door. My feet felt like cinder blocks as I made my way across the yard toward the house. Let's think about that simile. Her feet felt like cinder blocks. Do you know what cinder blocks are? They're really big, almost like bricks made of cement that we use to build the foundation of a house. So they're very heavy, not something you would want to fall on your foot, let alone try to drag them with your feet. You wouldn't be able to move if you had cinder blocks on your feet. So what do you think she is comparing that to as she's comparing her feet to cinder blocks? They're heavy, they're dragging. She has some type of feeling of dread, right? She knows she has to make things right, but let's face it, Charlie's not really good at apologies. The only thing we've seen Charlie be really good at is her anger, right? So she's kind of apprehensive or hesitant or very slow to want to go inside and make this right. More than anything, I wanted to just go back to my room and pretend like this day had never happened. We've all had some of those. But I didn't. I just put one cinder block foot in front of the other until I was on the back porch where Gus and Bertha sat gazing out at the mountain view. "Hey," I said with my voice sounding like a sniffling baby. I kept my eyes on the leaf-covered floorboards of the porch. "Hey there," said Gus. I couldn't even look at Bertha, but her silence seemed to smack me hard. So she says, "Hey," but only Gus answers back. Bertha says nothing. I sat down and I kept staring at and studying the faded hearts and stars that I drew on my arm with that pen. From somewhere way down in the woods, Bullfrog croaked, sending his deep-throated call echoing out into the cool evening air. I counted to 3 in my head, and then I just said it. "I'm sorry, Bertha." And then I did what I told myself I most definitely was not going to do. I cried hard. And I swear I could not stop no matter how much I wanted to. The worst part, was that I couldn't get myself to tell Bertha all those things that I practiced in my head while I was walking up the driveway all the way back to the house. Like how I didn't mean to holler at her, how I didn't really hate this house that was perched on the mountainside with the Pegasus constellation up there in the sky, hovering over the porch, how those canning jars in my room didn't really bother me one little bit, and most of all, how I loved those Cinderella pillows because, I mean, who doesn't love Cinderella? But all I did was cry. I couldn't get any of that out. And then Bertha was kneeling in front of me with her warm hand on my ink-stained arm. And she said to me, "Charlie, you're a blessing in this house." A blessing? She could have called me mean. She could have called me hateful and other horrible things. But she called me a blessing. And then Gus stood up and just said the perfect Gus thing. "Let's have some of that blackberry cobbler before supper. Let's eat dessert first tonight." So that's what we did. The 3 of us sat out on the porch as the stars are just beginning to twinkle up in that Carolina sky, and we ate blackberry cobbler before supper. And while Bertha told us about how her friend Racine backed her car into a flagpole down at the post office that afternoon, and then she just drove off like nothing even happened, there was an acorn that seemed to fall off the branches of the oak tree, hanging over the porch, and it fell right by my feet. And I nearly spilled my cobbler when I jumped up and grabbed it. I had almost let the day slip by without making my wish. And now here came an acorn just like it was dropped right down from the heavens. I hesitated, but then I went on and I did what I had to do. I turned in a circle 3 times, clutching that acorn tight, making my wish. And then I went back to my room and I set the acorn down on the windowsill. And I would leave it there for 3 days to make sure my wish would be even stronger. That's what my Girl Scout leader and rally told me about acorn wishes. and that it could possibly not be a lie because, I mean, Girl Scout leaders don't lie. After supper, we had some more blackberry cobbler. Gus went out to the garden to make sure the sprinkler was turned off, and Bertha said, "Stay right here, Charlie. I want to show you something." She went to her room and came back with a tattered shoebox. She took off the lid and said, "Look." And I peered inside. Photographs. Bertha was rummaging through them, and she took one out. She smiled at it and handed it to me. She said, "That's your mama and me." And then she pointed to the handwriting on the back. It said Bertha and Carla in big printed letters. I took the faded old photograph from her. There were two young girls sitting on the hood of a car with their arms around each other, hugging. "Which one's my mama?" I asked. And Bertha pointed to the smaller girl. I squinted down at her. She was missing her two front teeth, and she had a Band-Aid on her elbow. I couldn't take my eyes off that girl. I imagined her getting down from that car and skipping around in circles. I imagined her singing with her big sister, Bertha in the back seat of their daddy's car, and I imagined her telling knock-knock jokes and roller skating and eating ice cream on the porch at night. When did this gap-toothed little girl turn into that sad woman in the dark bedroom in Raleigh who couldn't get out of her bathrobe? I turned to Bertha and I asked, "Did y'all love each other?" "We sure did." And then she showed me some more photographs. There was one of my mama opening a present next to a Christmas tree, and then the two of them playing with a puppy in the snow. There was one of Bertha pulling mama in a wagon on the dirt road. "Well, why don't y'all see each other anymore?" I asked. Bertha let out a big sigh and shook her head. "When you grow up, Charlie, sometimes life gets complicated." That wasn't a very good answer, I thought, but I could tell it was the only one I was going to get. So I just said, "Oh." And when Gus came back from the garden, we went out on the porch. They held hands while Bertha told us about some man selling moldy strawberries out of the back of the truck on Highway 14. And then she said, "You can call Jackie tomorrow if you want to, Charlie." "No thanks," I said. It was almost so quiet I could hear Bertha breathing. I could feel her staring at me and looking at me, but I just stared out of those treetops. "Charlie," she said, "don't be mad at Jackie." "I'm not mad at Jackie." And I said that, but it was a huge, big, fat lie. And it was like a dark cloud settling over me. I was mad at Jackie. She acted like she didn't even have one single trouble in the whole world. You know, hanging on her clothesline. I don't think she cared about me one bit. And then we sat there in silence, just breathing in the cool night air, listening to the crickets underneath the porch. And that night when I went to bed, I laid there in the dark and I just pictured a clothesline full of somebody else's troubles. I knew for sure there were a lot of them that I'd rather pluck off that line than my own. And I imagined what other people's troubles might be. I mean, maybe people would have toothaches or something, or math tests with like a big fat F on them or something. I mean, maybe there were lost cats, or people who had ugly hair, you know, or people who had broken down cars that didn't work. But I mean, none of those troubles could hold a candle next to mine. My troubles seemed to weigh down that clothesline like a sack full of bricks. I tiptoed to the window and stared out into the night sky, thinking maybe I'd see a falling star to wish on. The moon was bright over the mountains and sent a shimmering glow across the yard, making shadows that seemed to snake around the dogwood tree, creeping along the garden fence. I knew Wishbone was out there somewhere, all by his lonesome little self. I wondered what he was doing right that minute. Maybe eating stale bread out of somebody's garbage can, trotting along the highway in the moonlight, sleeping underneath somebody's porch. I hoped Gus wasn't right about Wishbone wanting to be a stray dog. But then I remembered how he had whacked his tail at me that day when he saw me. He liked me. I was sure of it. And he was mine. Or he was gonna be. He didn't have to be a stray. I mean, anymore. And I bet he would just love me. I clasped my hands together like I was praying, and I whispered into the darkness, "Please come back, Wishbone. Please come back." And that brings us to chapter 8. So, I know that I had you make a prediction about how Charlie might go about maybe catching Wishbone or what she was going to do to make him hers. And now we know that Howard agreed to help her. So if you're doing stop and jots in your journal, I want you to write down a quick prediction about how Howard and Charlie are going to work together to catch Wishbone. Howard said he would help her. What do you think that they're going to do? All right, I'll see you guys for chapter 9.